And we are back with the Power Panel, Amanda, Brad, Marie, and Tim. And yesterday, Liberal and NDP MPs walked out of a meeting. No one walk out of this, please. It was over to elect a new chair for the Parliamentary Status of Women Committee. And the Liberals and the NDP are opposed to the Conservatives' pick of Rachael Harder as chair because they say she is anti-abortion. So should being anti-abortion preclude an elected politician from chairing the committee or from chairing this committee in particular? So, Amanda, I'd like to start with you. What do you make of this move? The Conservative Party says she should be able to chair this committee. Should she?
No. I mean, listen, I think that a prerequisite for being chair of the Status of Women Committee is that you give a flying you-know-what about the status of women. You have to care about women's reproductive rights. You have to care about women's right to choose. If you don't care about those things, unequivocally, you should not be the chair of that committee. That is exactly what that committee should stand for.
Marie, what's your take on this?
I mean, I think the issue is that it is the Status of Women Committee. I don't think it's just that she wants to be chair of any committee. I think each side is being uber partisan in all of this, quite honestly. I mean, the Liberals walked out in a sort of grandstanding gesture and are saying they won't approve Ms. Harder ever, but they're also not continuing conversations with the Conservatives to try and find some common ground, find someone else perhaps that they could agree on, and now they're fundraising on the event. On the other side, the Conservatives can't be naive enough to think that this was not going to raise eyebrows and be seen as a contentious nomination.
Were the Conservatives being partisan here, do you think?
I don't think this was an innocent choice. A big part of the Conservative caucus and the Conservative base is social conservative, and that's fine, but don't pretend that they don't exist, and don't pretend that something like this was perhaps to reassure some of them that they will still be heard, even though the new leader, Andrew Scheer, was very careful during the leadership race to reassure the other side that the abortion debate would not be open, that he would not bring things forward on this front, even though he is himself pro-life. If you look at the shadow cabinet of Mr. Scheer, 18 members of the 40 members are pro-life MPs, according to Campaign Life Coalition, who does this survey and based on votes and records and positions establishes if a member of parliament is pro-life. I don't think that is an innocent proportion. And I mean, by presenting Ms. Harder and insisting that they will not present anyone else and it has to be her, I think they are also not being of necessarily good faith when they then afterwards complain that the committee is stalled.
Tim and Brad, please.
I struggle with this one on a couple of different fronts. I'm pro-choice myself, but Rachael Harder is an individual of great accomplishment. She's pro-life, a different view than probably most of this panel has. She has an impressive background and resume. Should she automatically be disqualified? I hear Amanda's points, but this is also the same government that said we have to respect diversity. Should diversity not be respected? And this particular view that and lifestyle choice that Ms. Harder has here, so is it selective diversity? I think it's, yes, there's been a bit too much grandstanding. I agree with Marie on that, but maybe this debate is helpful to challenge the limits of what the Prime Minister and the government mean by diversity only in their circumstances or not.
Brad, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think this is bad for Scheer because what he's handed the opposition is the ability to walk out, make a committee that doesn't make headlines in our daily newspapers or online every day, a big wedge issue that I believe that Scheer is vulnerable on going forward. So he's handed the opposition, those who are pro-choice in the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party, a platform to talk about women's rights and where that fits in and rally that base. The longer this drags on, I don't think it's helpful at all for Scheer because I think that he represents all that there is of the anti-abortion vote. I don't think it's very diversified. Maybe in Quebec it could go a couple of different places, but by and large it's already with him. So there's nothing to gain for him dragging this out. He should have known that in advance. But if he said it during the leadership that I don't want to reopen this up or do anything, then he's actually kind of done a misstep with this because this as Marie says, it's unlikely that this was innocent. And he's handing his opponents a wedge that they're going to drive it through, and there's no end in sight unless they equivocate and pick a new Conservative to chair it.
I agree it's not without risk. I mean, to sit here and say that would be foolish. But I think if you're Scheer, you need to take a few risks. And one of the areas where the Prime Minister...
This early?
what does he have to lose, really? I mean, you know, the Prime Minister is, I mean, this is
Moderating
no,
urban voters?
but it's this early if it is kept in the frame of a social conservative issue. And there are some arguments to be made that it is. But if it can be opened up into a bigger challenge around the Liberals' commitment to diversity only means one particular way of looking at things, and they can mount it in different platforms beyond this particular committee, maybe it has some value. But Andrew Scheer is not going to win or dent Justin Trudeau unless he takes some risks.
Except you have to remember that...
Amanda, you're next, I promise.
You have to remember that right after Mr. Scheer was elected, in the hours after, some conservative parliamentarians from Quebec said they were worried about his election. They told me that they didn't know how they could sell a guy like Mr. Scheer, who has admitted that he's pro-life, and that's fine, it's his values, but who has admitted so in a province that is seen as more progressive. Quebec conservative parliamentarians were worried about that, and this gives the opposition or his rivals the edge to say, see, he is pro-life and he is at least looking like he's courting that vote and trying to tell them something will happen or I'll speak up for you. And I know that the Conservatives are trying to make this an issue about diversity and freedom of speech, but I mean, I don't think this is only an issue because it's pro-life and status of women. What if it was someone who denies Francophones' rights, who was named chair of the Official Languages Committee? I'm not sure that people would be much more receptive to that. What if it was someone like a senator who believes that Indigenous people don't have the right to self-government? Hypothetically, who chaired a committee? I don't think people would be much more receptive to that and accept it.
Okay, I want to get Amanda in here. Amanda?
Well, and I don't buy the calculus that the Conservative Party thought to themselves, well, let's put, the Prime Minister in a box on diversity issues. In fact, I think that it does the opposite. It gives him a platform to talk about an issue that's so important to women. And it does so in such a public way, such an ability to trump some of the things that he's been talking about since the beginning. It actually allows him to talk about the things that he's very best at speaking about. So I have a hard time believing that this was, a gun aimed at taking down the Liberals on the area of diversity. That just doesn't make any political sense to me whatsoever.
But Amanda, just on this point, the Conservatives have said that officially they're not going to bring this issue back and that people can hold personal opinions. Maybe some Liberals may hold this personal opinion. And because it is not active party policy and will not be brought back, her views on abortion do not matter.
Yeah, but I agree with Marie. I think that when that may be true, and that's fine for her as an MP, and she's a democratically elected MP. But this is the Status of Women Committee. And the very fact that that's what it is, women's reproductive rights and a woman's right to choose is at the very core, foundational to the status of women. And how can you possibly chair that committee fairly if you hold an opposing view?
And you, super quickly, and you'll notice that pro-life or social conservative groups like Real Women are sending out press releases today, pointing this out to their members.
The committee does not support the equality of all women, but only supports those select women who accept an extreme feminist ideology.
But also pointing out the fact that Mr. Scheer is standing up for them.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's, I hear Amanda on the committee, it's status of women, but I think that is a relevant argument that it's more than just the reproductive debate that gets discussed there, and there's so many other matters that get there. So simply because you have one very strong position on the reproductive debate side, you're pro-life, you shouldn't chair it. It's complicated.
Brad, I got about 30 seconds. You want to final point?
Listen. All committees are masters of their own. They should be the masters of their own domain. In terms of who should chair it, right? This is an issue among those members of the committee. The Conservatives get to select the committee chair. If Scheer wants this to go away, he needs to find another solution. He should have, if he didn't want this, if he wanted this debate, it's a silly debate to have for the Conservatives right now when there's so many great things to beat the government up over. Including, the tax stuff that the Conservatives have been leading on for the last couple of days. They're distracting themselves, and when sometimes when you've got the government on the ropes over a particular issue, don't give them something to get out of jail. And I think that they've helped here get the Liberals out of jail.
Okay, we're out of time. We're gonna have to leave it there. Chatty bunch. Try to bust out a little bit next time, Tim. Thanks so much to the Power Panel: Amanda Alvaro, Brad Levine, Tim Powers, and Marie Vastel.